Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have a June TBR for you. I don't usually do TBR videos, although I do create TBRs regularly. If you check any of my notebooks, then you will find lists of books that I would like to get to during any given month. And usually when I write these lists, I end up disappointed in myself because I always look back over my reading journal and wonder why I can't read as many books as I read in the first month of the year. For the last few years, I always seem to spend my January reading tons, and then that fizzles out for the rest of the year as I seem to settle back into normal life and question just why I am unable to achieve that same amount of books read. However, June is also Pride Month, I believe, and I'd been saving some books to read in June, accumulating them to this point really, that I think that I'd like to share it with you. Share some of the books I plan on reading, see whether you've read any of them and can say whether I ought to read that before I read another book. And yeah, so I suppose I should just get started with things with Companion Piece by Ali Smith. Picked a certain amount of books off my shelves and I chose 10 that I think I definitely want to read in this next month and have some outliers that could be a pile of possibilities. So Companion Piece is exactly what it says on the tin, a companion to the seasonal quartets that Smith released from 2016 to 2020. And I didn't know that this was going to exist until I saw it mentioned on somebody's Instagram page and decided that I had to go out and get it. I do not know what it's going to be discussing. I am hoping for plays on language and prose to interrogate and think over and mull over. We like the word mull. Other than that, don't know out about it. Know that certain people dislike it. Know that certain people like it. As with all books. Then we have All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, which is a memoir and a manifesto that I believe well, there we go, I read one chapter. Bookmark in here on page 36. I read one chapter when this book came out in 2020. So I think I was going to be reading this for non-fiction November that year. I enjoyed what I read and then I never read any further, and I think that my friend Charlie actually was trying to spur me on to get this one read. Be bold, be brave and queer. So we will see how I get on with this. It's a relatively fast read, wide margins, big font, and it's discussing, in his groundbreaking young adult memoir, prominent writer and LGBTQIA+ activist George M. Johnson shares both glorious and gut-wrenching memories of growing up black and queer in America. Too much caffeine and metal in your teeth means you stumble over words in your old age. Then we have The Fraternity of the Estranged by Brian Anderson. I bought this last year, I think. So this one is the book that July 2017 marked the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation in England and Wales of sexual relations between two men in private. And this book is the author crafting a highly engaging account of a largely forgotten history, revealing the lives, works and mutual influence of three individuals who confronted attitudes towards homosexuality in late Victorian England. All I remember is seeing all the footnotes in this book and getting somewhat put off because I had this fear that this book might end up being a bit too academic, but we will see. Are we going to get to any books that I actually know what they're about? Probably not, because the next book is Love in the Big City by Sang-Young Park, translated by Anton Her. I think this is the one that starts off a bit... This is the one that has a completely different start to an end, isn't it? Where there's a weird twist, not weird, but like there's a twist in terms of narrative tone, I think. A fresh and unique debut novel by the best-selling young star of Korean queer fiction, Love in the Big City is an energetic, joyful and moving novel that depicts both the glittering nighttime world of Seoul and the bleary-eyed morning after. Young is a cynical yet fun-loving Korean student who pinballs from home to class to the beds of recent Tinder matches. He and Yahi, his female best friend and roommate, frequent nearby bars where they suppress their anxieties about their love lives, families and money with rounds of soju and freezer-chilled Marlboro Reds. Relatively short. Got that when they announced the International Booker long list, alongside Happy Stories Mostly by Norma and Eric Pasaribu, translated by Tiffany Tsao, and got them both and ordered them from the publisher, Tilted Access Press, and then never got around to reading them. Then they didn't make it to the shortlist, so didn't end up reading them then, because I kept thinking, well, I'll save them for June then, and now June's upon us, and they're both on this TBR, despite the fact that I don't know anything about them. I do know about this next book, though. This is Fabulosa by Paul Baker, and I wanted this because it discusses Polari, which here it says, Polari, Britain's secret gay language, and it offered its speakers a degree of public camouflage and means of identification. And this is going to be a book discussing the history of that, and it offers a fascinating and tender account of this funny, filthy and ingenious language. I have an interest in language, and that's why I wanted to read this. And I kept seeing it mentioned around and about, and when I saw it on the Queerlet website, decided that I was going to purchase this. Non-fiction, hopefully. Oh, goodness gracious. It was published in 2019. 2019. So that means for 3 years I've been seeing this mentioned and never got around to reading this. Well, it's just like me and films, really, that one. This is a film I've been meaning to see, and it came into the shop and I said, oh, I've been meaning to watch that, and it turned out it came out 12 years ago. We have Elena Knows by Claudia Piñeiro, translated by Francis Riddle, and yeah, it's been sat on this seat here, waiting for me to read it. Story told over a single day. Disabled mother doesn't agree with the verdict given over her daughter's death and decides that she's going to investigate it herself. Then we have Fairyland by Alyssia Abbott, a memoir of my father. This one was recommended by Sarah from Hardcover Hearts when we went around Manchester together a few weeks ago. And in this vibrant memoir, Alyssia Abbott recounts growing up in 1970s San Francisco with Steve Abbott, a gay single father during an era when that was rare. Reconstructing their time together from the remarkable cachet of Steve's writings, Alyssia gives us an unforgettable portrait of a tumultuous historic period in San Francisco, as well as an exclusively moving account of a father's legacy and a daughter's love. I'm recognising now that there does seem to be a fair amount of non-fiction here, but there's also... I'm varying it this month. Non-fiction and fiction. You never get that from me, do you? Another recommendation from Sarah was Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lowe. I know that it involves a lesbian bar, because it says that right here. I really should start figuring out what books are about before I acquire them nowadays. I'm just going off recommendations. If I'm seeing a book mentioned, then if it's been recommended, I'm getting it. So that looks interesting. I just accidentally skipped to the end. I'm not turning into my mother. And it seems... Yes. So you have all of the fiction for the first 300 or something, and then you get an author's note that's going to list some of the history. So that should be fun. Fiction and non-fiction in one. I mean, the non-fiction is just an author's note to give you a bit of a historical context, but that's all right, isn't it? And is that one San Francisco too? Is it? It just says America. Well, I saw San Francisco mentioned, and that's been in two. Which is also mentioned, well, Frog Music by Emma Donoghue is set in San Francisco as well. Both that and this seem to be set in Chinatown, and this is on a pile of possibilities for next month because I've read one chapter so far and I'm still umming and ahhing over it because it is dealing with a murder and it is going back and forth, but I don't know whether it's going to be one for me. I was going to save it until later in the year because I feel like it'd be a good autumnal read, but I have started reading it because I was also interested in the story. But that's only on a pile of possibilities. The final one that I definitely think I'll read is The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. I have started reading this. There's a chance I might finish it before June. If I do, then it's obviously read and I don't need to worry about reading it in June. This is the follow-up to The Appeal that I read last week and I found at the library. I've started it. It hasn't captured my attention like The Appeal did, but I am intrigued to see where the story goes because it does seem to be like one of those classic crimes told in a more modern fashion. We will see about this one as we will see about all of these ones, but particularly in terms of this one, with it being voice notes, I am reminded of something that I watched at school as a child and I've never figured out what it was called, but so far I don't think I should be getting this feeling from an adult novel, but I have been reminded of the CBBC crime series because this man is recounting his childhood. He's found this book on a bus and Miss Isles has confiscated it and it's going to be linked to an author whose book was banned many years before the events of the novel. Now let's move on to the actual pile of possibilities here. Firstly, we have Streets of Laredo by Larry McMurtry, and I was reading Harry Heathcote this week by Anthony Trollope, and the way that was described, going on about the dry prairie of Australia and the friction between the male cast members within that novel reminded me of a Western. And everyone else is reading Lonesome Dove, so I decided I'd go with the sequel. Then, because I want to try and get through my Anthony Trollope books, I decided I would add another to my TBR, and I couldn't figure out which one to go through, but so I did a random number generator of the amount of books that I do have, discounting The Way We Live Now because I'm reading that with Emily of Novel Novels later this year. Spoilers. And the random number generator was kind to me. It gave me 36, which I just counted across my shelves until I got to that, and that was Cousin Henry. I don't know anything about that, which is the way I am about all of the Anthony Trollope books. But it does say here, Cousin Henry was written in 6 weeks, and because Trollope's hand was by now severely affected by writer's cramp, the novel was in part dictated to Florence Bland, Rose Trollope's niece. But otherwise, I don't know out about it. I could probably get to it because it's relatively short. It's under 200 pages. And you know, if I got some of the short books out of the way, I could do them relatively quickly. But we'll see. We'll see. That's what I'm going to call this video. We'll see. June TBR, we'll flaming see. Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Another book that I was going to read whenever this book came out. Shall we see? Shall we embarrass ourselves again? 2020. Again. Really looked forward to this book when it came out. Was going to read it for Halloween that year. It didn't arrive in time. It didn't arrive until the December. And I promptly forgot. So, trans mask protagonist who... Does he accidentally raise someone from the dead? He sets out to find the ghost of his murdered cousin, but the ghost he actually summons is Julian Diaz, the school's resident bad boy, and that's about all I know. Just a few more books now, folk. Actually, can I talk about this one? I can talk about it. Read The Magician by Comtibin for the BookTube Prize and got to discussing it with a member of the writers group, which doesn't break BookTube Prize rules because I'm still not talking about it on the internet. And she gave me some of Thomas Mann's work to just see what the writer was about. So this is a book of novellas, Death in Venice, Tristan and Tonio Kroger, and she suggested that I read the latter because that is her favourite, so that is a 50-page novella that I will probably read this month. Then we have Orphea by Joanne M. Harris, because I forgot that I own this. As much as I love Joanne Harris's writing, when I got this book, I immediately shelved it. Sometimes, more often than not, I don't shelve the books when I get them. I leave them on the box that I'm currently sat on so that I have something to pick up, don't forget it, and if I like it, it gets shelved. If I don't like it, then it goes. Joanne M. Harris went straight onto the shelf because she's a writer she's one of my favourites. And this one is another one of her folk tales. Indeed, I'm going to have to look, because part of me feels like I read it and part of me feels like I didn't. But I also don't know whether I'm misremembering, because I did read Honeycomb last year. But usually these are quite fast to get through. Indeed, part of me still debates leaving it till autumn, because I do find that I do think it might be a good read for a Sunday afternoon in autumn when it's a bit rainy. Trying to get that little bit of autumnal atmosphere about. But you never know. Blimey, all this from books that I've not even read. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, translated by Anne Goldstein. Everybody's read the Neapolitan Quartet. I have all 4 of them. Got from the charity shop. Italian. Learning Italian. Seemed fitting. Read The Lost Daughter last year. Enjoyed that. See what all the fuss is about. Maybe, possibly, probably not, because my idea was to do a vlog about reading all 4 of those books. House of Names by Com Toy Bin. Saw it at the library, and actually it came into the charity shop and I was going to buy it, and I thought no. And then I was in the library last week and I saw it and I thought I'll give it a go. Greek retelling. I think Clytemnestra is going after Agamemnon after he has chosen to sacrifice their daughter. Agamemnon has chosen to sacrifice his daughter, and now the rest of his family want revenge for that. This pile of books is getting too high. But the final book I have on this pile of possibilities is The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. That comes from reading Harry Heathcote as well. I was enjoying the slower style of prose, and I thought maybe I should actually get around to reading The Two Towers, considering I borrowed both this and Return of the King from the charity shop last year, having read The Fellowship of the Ring. Basically, last year I fell into this thing of just wanting slower moving fiction, and I was feeling I had a particular longing for The Hobbit, and I don't know why. I never used to like The Lord of the Rings when I was younger. I tried to read it many times and found it a bit boring, but as an older reader I really enjoyed the slower pace and found myself interacting with the world a lot more and enjoying it a lot more than I had enjoyed it as a child, so I was glad to read it as an adult and have my opinion changed. So once I read that, I borrowed the next 2 books, and I haven't read them yet, and I don't know why, but that's here because I read the first book in summer last year, so I think I ought to read this book in some of this shit. We'll see. We will see. We will see about all of these bloody books, because I might be judging for the BookTube prize as well again. But for the entire year I've done differently than I did with the past 2 years, where I've read all 6 books in 1 month and I spread them over the 2 months so that it makes it feel like there's less. And that's obviously only if I get chosen to judge again, I didn't release a video for the first round. I might do, I might not. It's just who I am as a person. Anyway, them's the books. If you've read any of these books and think that I should prioritise them over others, then please feel free to let me know in the comments. I hope that you got something out of this video. But honestly, I don't know whether you will have done. Indeed, if you are reading any of these books next month and fancy having a buddy read, then contact me. Either here or through Instagram. There won't be any link in the description because I haven't figured that out yet. You could go to a past video, there'll be a link there. I think I'm Charles.Heathcote on there. But hey, have a good June, and until next time, that is all.